The desert doesn't care who you are. It only asks if you can survive. Julian Sinclair didn't flee, he withdrew, with style. The midnight blue Porsche hummed like a secret through the Mojave silence, headlights slicing ribbons through the heat-hazed darkness. Cacti and yuccas stood like sentinels under a bruised moon. Julian's tailored blazer Armani, of course, was draped across the passenger seat, crumpled beside a half-empty bottle of San Pellegrino and a vintage camera he never figured out how to use. His tie was long gone. His reputation? Shredded on every gossip feed from Manhattan to Malibu. The notification chimes had stopped hours ago. He'd powered down the phone when it became clear no one was calling to help. Just to watch him fall. He flexed his jaw, rolled his neck, the tension sinking deeper with each passing mile from L.A. The video had gone viral by breakfast. Julian Sinclair, heir to the Sinclair hospitality empire, wrapped in the arms of a masked woman at a private gala. Lips grazing her ear, eyes smoky with implication. The still frame was devastatingly good. Too good. It wasn't even real. But real didn't matter. Not anymore. By noon, hashtags were trending. By dinner, the board had called an emergency meeting. Optics are untenable, they'd said. Go dark. Lay low. Be anywhere but here. So here he was, speeding into exile, his family's least profitable property, Mirage Retreat, a sun-bleached desert oasis in southern Arizona that hadn't turned a solid quarter in years. Julian had once called it the corpse in the portfolio. Now, it was his refuge. As the highway narrowed into dirt road, the sky broke open with lavender haze and smears of golden starlight. The air smelled of dust, sage, and something unplaceable like waiting. The entrance gate to Mirage Retreat loomed under an arch of bleached stone. Hand-carved lettering read, "Where silence heals and the soul listens." Julian scoffed. Someone fire whoever approved that copy. The gates creaked open, motion activated but sluggish. Beyond them, the resort sprawled like a forgotten kingdom. Adobe villas dotted among tall ocotillo, a main lodge with rust, red clay roofs, and a dry fountain ringed in cracked tile. At the center, a gleaming dome greenhouse or observatory, he couldn't remember, caught the moonlight like a peeled pearl. No staff greeted him. No valet. No champagne flutes with paper-thin stems. Just wind and the distant chirp of cicadas. He parked, grabbed his duffel, and stepped into the thick, fragrant hush. His Italian loafers scuffed against stone, softened by time. The air was warmer here, more intimate, the kind of heat that sank beneath your skin and whispered secrets. That's when he saw her. Just a silhouette at first, backlit by the greenhouse dome. A woman inside, alone. She moved like she belonged there, deliberate, focused. Her hands fluttered over plants, trimmed something, lifted a pot. She bent low, and her curls spilled forward like shadows. He couldn't see her face. Only the shape of devotion. Julian lingered for a moment too long. She didn't notice him. Or if she did, she didn't care. He turned toward the lodge, chest tightening with a mix of exhaustion and something he didn't want to name. Inside, the Mirage felt like a dream that had given up trying to wake. Walls glowed in muted terracotta, the scent of jasmine oil faint in the halls. A single desk lamp burned at reception, casting halos across dust-flecked air. The desk clerk looked up from a worn paperback and jolted to attention. "Mr. Sinclair," he gasped. "We weren't expecting." Julian raised a hand. "Don't worry. I'm not here to fire anyone. Yet." The clerk chuckled nervously. "We, got word from corporate. You've been assigned Villa 3. Fully serviced, but you might find the thermostat temperamental." "Perfect," Julian muttered. A metaphor. He signed the guest ledger, a pointless ritual, but comforting somehow, and headed back out, past the courtyard where desert roses bloomed under moonlight. He paused. They weren't just any roses. They looked ancient. Their petals were blushed with peach and coral, frilled like something out of a Klimt painting. The kind of bloom you'd see in a dream and forget by morning. He leaned in. The scent was hypnotic, clean, earthy, and faintly citrus. They shouldn't have been blooming now. Not in August. Not in this heat. He brushed a petal, light as breath. Somewhere, a door clicked shut. He looked up. The woman from the greenhouse now stood across the courtyard, framed by the archway. Closer now, her features caught in half-light, eyes dark and observant, cheekbones dusted with sweat, a pair of dirt-streaked gloves tucked in her belt. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Then she turned and walked away without a word. Julian didn't sleep that night. The villa was clean, spacious, and beautifully silent, an architectural whisper of old adobe bones and modern restraint. But something in him stayed wired. Restless. He paced barefoot on cool tile floors, poured himself a scotch. Then another. But the desert air outside the French doors called louder than the ice in his glass. He stood on the back patio, overlooking the dark slopes of sand and shadow. Moonlight poured like milk over the horizon. The stars here didn't blink. They watched. He lit a cigarette, his third in 2 years. The roses still played on his mind. So did the woman. She'd looked at him like she'd seen enough of his type to know what came next, and walked away anyway. By morning, the sun hit hard. Brutal, gold-edged, unapologetic. Julian rolled up his sleeves, sunglasses in place, and made his way to the main lodge's conference wing, a deserted stretch last used for a wellness retreat. Judging by the pastel signage still half peeling on the wall, radical stillness, your journey inward begins here. He smirked. Then came a voice from behind, firm, feminine, low, and clipped like the desert before a monsoon. You're him. He turned. She stood in the corridor, skin sun-warmed, hair swept into a messy twist under a wide-brimmed straw hat. A plain chambray shirt hung loose over work pants stained at the knees. Her gloves dangled from a carabiner clipped to her belt loop. She carried a clipboard like it was a sword. Depends who you mean, he said. You're Julian Sinclair. He took off his sunglasses. Still depends. You redirected $38,000 from the marketing fund to my budget. Julian blinked. Ah. So she did know. She stepped closer. Why? He shrugged. Felt like being a hero for once. That's not funny. I wasn't joking. There was a pause. The air between them buzzed with heat, bees, and unfinished thoughts. She narrowed her gaze. Are you trying to save face, or the resort? I haven't decided yet. Then you don't get to make decisions that affect my work. Julian crossed his arms. With all due respect, don't say it. He stopped. She looked like she wanted to bite the words out of his mouth. I've spent 5 years here, she said. Cataloging, crossbreeding, preserving. Those roses? They're a new hybrid of desert bloom I've been documenting since grad school. They're endangered. They're impossible. And this resort, your resort, is the only place they've survived in the wild in decades. They're not decoration. They're science. History. Life. Julian stared. He wasn't used to being spoken to like this. He wasn't used to sincerity delivered like a dare. She went on, keener now. Your board doesn't care. They cut my funding. I was 3 weeks from packing up and sending these roses to die in a university freezer. You changed that. I need to know why. Her throat tightened. She didn't blink. Julian looked at her, really looked. Under the brim of her hat, she had freckles and a faint scar above her eyebrow. There was something about her that was all sharp edges and soft roots. Wild, but intentional. I read your file, he said finally. Last week. You wrote a grant proposal to the foundation, one my mother created, by the way, and it landed on my desk. You skimmed it. It was poetic. Kind of annoying, honestly, but it stuck. So when I saw the budget for marketing billboards in Vegas and luxury influencer outreach, you mean the ones with the gold robes and champagne yoga? He grimaced. Exactly. I thought, to hell with it. Let the roses bloom. She blinked, the slightest flicker of surprise in her face. Julian smiled. Just a little. What's your name, by the way? Dr. Rose Martinez. He exhaled a laugh. You're kidding. No. And I don't do flower jokes. I wasn't going to make one. You were. Okay, I was. He offered his hand. Nice to officially meet you, Dr. Martinez. She hesitated. then shook. Her hand was warm, firm, honest. "You have dirt under your nails," he said. "I'm a botanist, not a bride." A beat of silence. Then they both smiled. They walked toward the greenhouse. Rose moved quickly, weaving through narrow gravel paths between mesquite and creosote. She pointed out things he would have missed: a barrel cactus whose ribs had healed from a lightning strike, a hummingbird nest no bigger than a golf ball, life that pulsed in spite of heat and drought. Inside the dome, it was cooler. Mist hissed gently from overhead pipes. The air smelled of loam, water, and perfume. Roses clustered in raised beds, peach, crimson, golden cream and vines, spiraled along trellises like dancers, paused mid-spin. "This is my sanctuary," she said, voice softer now. Julian wandered past the rose. The sunlight filtering through the dome made the petals look like stained glass. "They really are extraordinary," he murmured. She watched him. "Why did you come here?" "Really?" He turned, hands in pockets. "Because I didn't want to run away, but I couldn't stay." "You're hiding." "Everyone hides. Some of us just do it with better lighting." She tilted her head. "The scandal. I didn't do what they said, but I didn't not do it either. That's cryptic. That's branding." She smiled, despite herself. "So what now?" "I guess I fixed the place." "And the roses?" He met her gaze. "We saved them." For a moment, the desert went quiet. Just the breath of water in pipes, the whisper of petals in breeze. Julian felt something shift not in the room, but inside himself. Rose nodded once. "Okay, but I need full autonomy. Within reason. And 2 interns. We'll talk. And no PR stunts. No promises." Her smile curled. "It's going to be a long summer, Sinclair." Julian leaned against the metal railing, watching her disappear behind a bed of fire-blush roses. He hadn't come here for purpose. But somehow, it had found him anyway. Chapter 2. Thorn and Bloom. Dr. Rose Martinez always started her day before the heat had teeth. By 5:45 a.m., she was already kneeling beside the southwest greenhouse bed, dirt on her palms, the air still cool enough to breathe without tasting it. With tweezers and patience, she worked her way through delicate buds, checking moisture levels, inspecting petal pigmentation, and noting the slow, stubborn growth of a particular hybrid she'd nicknamed Esperanza. Esperanza refused to bloom under pressure. Rose could relate. She barely noticed the footsteps until they stopped behind her. "You're up early," came a familiar, silk and sand voice. Julian Sinclair. Again, "Plants don't wait for influencers to wake up," she replied without looking. He chuckled, low and dry. "You've got a real thing against influencers, huh?" "No. Just the ones who mistake spirituality for aesthetics." Rose wiped her brow with the back of her hand and stood, slowly. She adjusted her hat and turned toward him. He wore linen today, perfectly creased khaki pants, rolled sleeves, a white button-down that probably cost more than her entire lab budget. "You came to observe?" she asked. He smiled. "You invited me." "I didn't." "You didn't not." She sighed. "Fine. You can watch. But only if you help." He blinked. "Help?" She shoved a spare pair of gloves into his hands. "Pollination protocol. Let's see if you're good for something beyond sound bites." Minutes later, Julian was elbow-deep in rose branches, face half covered by a mesh mask. "This feels like surgery," he muttered, eyes squinting. "It is," Rose said. With less blood and more poetry, he gently dusted pollen from one bloom to another. Under her watchful gaze, his movements were tentative, as if the petals might shatter from touch. She couldn't tell if he was careful because he cared, or because he was afraid to fail. "You're surprisingly gentle," she said. "I've been called worse." "Why are you really here, Julian?" He didn't answer right away. Outside, a breeze stirred the leaves. Inside, moisture clung to skin and silence. "I didn't grow up in the desert," he said eventually. "But my mother did. She loved this place. Said the heat taught her how to endure. She used to bring me here in the summers. We'd hike at dawn. She made me smell every plant like it was scripture." Rose tilted her head. You don't talk about her in interviews, she said. No one asks. He looked up from the rose he'd been tending. She died when I was 17. Cancer. Fast. And after that, this place went quiet. Like it forgot how to bloom. Rose said nothing, just studied him. He didn't have to share that, but he had. And the scandal? She asked. Softly now. His jaw clenched. It's not what it looks like. But it doesn't matter. What matters is, I needed a place where I wasn't a headline. And you thought my greenhouse was paparazzi-proof. I thought it was alive. Which is more than I can say for most of my life lately. The morning wore on. By 8, the sun pressed down like a warning. Rose led Julian through the outdoor beds, rattling off Latin names and hybrid histories. He trailed behind, asking smart questions, occasionally dumb ones. She didn't mind. It meant he was listening. At the north garden wall, they paused by a twisted desert willow, where a cracked bench waited in dappled shade. Julian sat, wiping sweat from his brow. You really live like this? Rose nodded. I chose it. The silence. The work. The reality. You could be doing this in a lab somewhere. Boston. Berkeley. With air conditioning. I like dirt under my nails. He looked at her. Really looked. There's something different about you, he said. That's not a line, is it? No. It's awe. I think. Rose laughed, a small, startled sound. That's a new one. Julian leaned back, arms draped over the bench, eyes closing for a moment. The hush between them grew companionable. Honest. Then, why roses? He asked. Rose exhaled. Because they're misunderstood. He cracked an eye. People think they're delicate, she continued. Pretty. Decorative. But they're fighters. They adapt, mutate, evolve in brutal climates. These ones survived flash floods, droughts, even a wildfire 10 years ago. Their roots go deep. You just have to pay attention. Julian nodded, something tightening behind his ribs. And they bleed, she added, half smiling. If you touch them wrong. Later that afternoon, the board called again. Julian sat in the resort's shadowy lounge blinds drawn, his tie loose, Rose's voice still echoing somewhere in his mind as 3 of his family's board members grilled him over speakerphone. You're still at the Mirage? Snapped Everett Chow, his father's old CFO. I am. You were supposed to be laying low, not playing botanist. Julian stood, pacing. I'm overseeing a conservation initiative, one my mother started. There's no PR value in dead flowers. They're not. He stopped himself. Veronica Che's name came up. So did the ongoing scandal. There was talk of cutting losses, selling the Mirage to Belmont Hospitality. They'd offered high. The board was tempted. You're not even supposed to be on site, another voice chimed in. It violates the current image strategy. Maybe the strategy's wrong, Julian muttered. Maybe you are. The line went dead. He stood in the silence. Outside, the roses swayed in desert wind. Somewhere behind the glass, Rose was working, living, thriving. He closed his eyes and made a decision. He was staying. No matter what the board or the world thought. Julian found her back in the greenhouse, crouched beside a weathered compost bin, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her entire body intent on examining the root system of a potted rose with the care of a surgeon. I'm staying, he said simply. She didn't look up. I figured. He raised a brow. No protest? No lecture? You'll get in the way, she muttered, brushing soil off a root bulb. He knelt beside her. I'll try not to. You will anyway. There was no venom in it, just truth, spoken plainly, the way Rose always did. Julian liked that about her. Liked it more than he should have this early. You ever think about how everything alive is fighting not to die? She asked suddenly. He blinked. Cheery thought. She cracked a small smile. I mean it. These roses shouldn't be here. This species, Rosa mirabilis, was recorded once, in the Sonoran wilds in 1918. Then gone. Extinct, they thought. Until 3 years ago, when I found one growing along the wash behind the resort's south wall. One. Single. Bloom. She turned toward him now, eyes bright beneath the shade of her brim. Do you know how improbable that is? For something lost to reappear. Julian was quiet. I uprooted it, she went on. Nursed it. Grew 8 more from graft. You're walking in a miracle. So yes, I'm territorial. He held her gaze. Good. Stay territorial. I just paid to keep your miracle alive. She stared at him. You paid. He nodded. Pulled strings. Rerouted funding. Bought time. They'll hate me for it. The look she gave him wasn't gratitude. It was suspicion. Why would you do that? She asked. You don't owe me anything. Julian hesitated, then answered truthfully. Because something about you makes me want to be better than I am. The air shifted. Rose stood abruptly. Don't romanticize me, Julian. I'm not your redemption arc. He followed her with his eyes as she moved across the room, arms crossed over her chest. You think I'm trying to seduce you with philanthropy? I think you're used to throwing money at things you don't understand. That's dong. Because it was mostly true. Then help me understand, he said, voice lower now. She paused. Outside, the wind stirred through chimes hung along the outer wall, an accidental music of glass and metal. She turned back, her voice softer. Do you want a tour? A real one? Julian nodded. So she led him. They spent the next hour weaving through humid corridors, stopping by terraced growth tables, under humming grow lights. She explained pH balances and photosensitivity. The roses, she told him, responded to affection. Pressure. Sound. Some of them opened more fully when Mozart was piped through hidden speakers. Seriously? He asked. She nodded. Roses are dramatic. Like you. He laughed, really laughed. The first time in weeks. By mid-afternoon, the light outside turned heavy, slanting through dome panels in long, amber beams. Rose led him to a smaller alcove, a private annex filled with bonsai-like desert flora. The air here was cooler, quieter. I don't bring people in here, she said. Julian looked around. It was beautiful. Tamed wilderness, under glass. A metaphor made real. Why me? He asked. She hesitated. Then, because despite everything, I think you're trying. He smiled. I am. Rose studied him. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Arrogance. PR damage control. Maybe an apology with a press kit attached. Disappointed? Surprised, she said. Then, and a little concerned. He stepped closer. Why concerned? Because if you're real, that's harder to walk away from. The words hung there like steam rising from skin. Their eyes met. Heat pulsed between them. Not just attraction, tension, friction. 2 tectonic plates pressing, shifting, ready to snap. Julian stepped back, just enough to breathe. Then don't walk away, he said. But she already had. Outside, near the rocky ridge that overlooked the resort's outer wall, a lens clicked into place. Veronica Chase adjusted the focus on her long-range camera and zoomed in. There they were inside the greenhouse annex. Talking. Laughing. Close. Too close. The botanist and the billionaire. She smirked and checked the lighting. The early evening sun bathed the dome in gold, illuminating their figures in silhouette like a Renaissance painting. Perfect. Veronica tapped a button. A small red light blinked. Recording. Let's see how far you're willing to fall, Julian Sinclair, she whispered. Then, without a sound, she vanished back into the scrub, dust rising behind her boots. Back inside the greenhouse, Julian lingered a few minutes longer. Rose was gone, called away by a phone alert about soil sensors malfunctioning in the south beds. He sat on a bench beneath the trellis, breathing in the scent of roses and wet stone. His fingers brushed a fallen petal. It clung to his skin, translucent, trembling. He hadn't expected this. Any of it. And yet, somewhere deep in the marrow of his bones, it felt like something was beginning. Something fragile. Fierce. Alive. Chapter 3. Mirage Negotiations. The Mirage's boardroom hadn't hosted a formal meeting in nearly 6 years. The long walnut table still bore faint water rings from forgotten mineral water bottles, and the projector flickered with ghost blue light despite being disconnected from Wi-Fi. No one had bothered dusting the corners or updating the Sinclair family crest etched into the floor tiles. Julian leaned against the head chair, not seated, not submissive, his phone on speaker as three voices crackled through the line like smoke. "Julian, this is unsustainable," barked Everett Chow. "We've reviewed the unauthorized fund transfer. $40,000 redirected without prior approval? That's not just impulsive. It's insubordination." He stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow, methodical circles. "Actually," Julian replied, voice calm, "it's discretionary use of line-item flex funds under Clause B7. Still active in the Mirage Charter, unless you've quietly rewritten that while I was dodging your press leaks." A brief silence. Then Serena Kwan, lean, surgical, the most ambitious of the group, snorted. "This resort is a failed asset. The offer from Belmont stands. High 7 figures. Why are you playing Desert Messiah?" "Because," Julian said evenly, "Mirage isn't just an asset. It's a liability." "Julian Sahil." "It was a vision. My mother's. A retreat of silence, not spectacle. A place where time slowed. Where things could grow, people included." "That idealism costs money," Serena said. "We're in the hospitality business, not ecotherapy." Julian's voice sharpened. "You sell dreams. Why not ones that matter?" On the other end, Everett groaned. "Don't make this a martyr play, Julian. Your lucky chase hasn't leaked worse." "She's circling," Julian said, "but I won't give her the kill. Then quit before she ruins you." Julian ended the call with a single tap. By the time he reached the greenhouse, the heat had intensified, coiling like tension against his collar. Inside, Rose was arguing with the irrigation system. A spray nozzle had burst, soaking her from the knees down. Her face was flushed, her curls frizzed by humidity and heat. "Everything okay?" he asked carefully. She didn't turn. "Define okay." Julian approached. "I just fought 3 board members and won." "Sort of. That a victory?" He smiled. "A stalemate in my favor. For now." Rose groaned and finally looked at him, strands of hair sticking to her temple. "You look like hell," she said. He grinned. "You're welcome." Then he rolled up his sleeves and stepped past her. She blinked as he knelt by the exposed pipe and began examining the damaged valve. "You're going to fix it?" she asked, hands on hips. "I've broken enough things lately. Might as well try the reverse." A pause. Then, softer. "You ever done this before? Fix a leak?" "No. But I've read about it. And I'm highly motivated." She didn't smile. Not yet. But something in her jaw softened. Julian worked in silence, fingers fumbling at first, then growing steadier. Rose handed him tools without needing to be asked. Their hands brushed once briefly, and the heat that flared wasn't from the sun. They didn't speak of it. Not yet. Later, over iced hibiscus tea on the lodge veranda, Julian pulled a small envelope from his pocket and slid it across the table to her. She raised an eyebrow. "Is this where you give me money with strings?" "No strings," he said. "Just science." Inside, a single typed memo from the Sinclair Foundation Finance Office. Rose scanned it. He watched her eyes widen. "This is," she whispered, "a restricted microgrant?" Julian nodded. 30 more days. Uninterrupted. Full autonomy. Quietly approved under my discretionary matching program. She blinked. "How?" "I'm not powerless," he said. "Just very, very tired of pretending I don't care." Her throat worked around the words she couldn't say. Julian leaned forward. "I don't expect thanks," he said softly. "But I'd like to keep walking through this greenhouse with you. If you'll let me." Something about his tone made her chest tighten. Not romance. Not seduction. Earnestness. It was rare. And heavier than she expected. She folded the letter, slow and precise. "This changes everything," she said. "I hope so." That evening, Rose stood at the outer edge of the resort's solar field, wind lifting the hem of her shirt. The sky bled orange into magenta as dusk fell. Julian's words played again in her head like a song she couldn't shake. I'd like to keep walking through this greenhouse with you." She wasn't naive. Men like Julian didn't stay. But something about the way he looked at the roses, the way he fumbled with the pipe valve, the quiet in him beneath all that polish, it tugged at her like roots through dry soil. She looked out across the resort's far boundary, past the greenhouse, toward the hill. And that's when she saw it. A glint of glass, high, motionless, watching. She narrowed her eyes. Someone was up there. She turned to shout, but the figure was gone. Dust. Silence. Stillness, like a held breath. Rose stood there for a long moment, and somewhere deep inside her, the first thorn of fear began to grow. Rose didn't tell Julian what she saw. Not yet. By the time she returned to the greenhouse, the sun had slipped beneath the horizon, staining the dome in muted purples and shadowed gold. Inside, Julian sat on the bench beneath the trellis, his head bowed, backlit by the soft halo of a grow light. He looked like a man halfway between surrender and resolve. She studied him for a long moment before stepping forward. "You okay?" she asked. He glanced up. "Do you think people ever really outrun their past?" Rose tilted her head. "I don't think they should try. Roots run in both directions." Julian smiled faintly. "Putik. Dangerous." She approached. Slow. Did something happen? He held up his phone, thumb hovering over a paused video. A tabloid feed. Veronica Chase's voice smooth, sharp as glass filled the air. Sources close to the Sinclair heir suggest he's currently holed up in Arizona, playing desert cowboy, while real executives try to clean up his mess. We're told he's found companionship. A passionate desert botanist, apparently. New flame or next scandal? The video cut to a grainy still. Him and Rose, shoulder to shoulder, walking through the rose beds, her hand grazing his arm. A telephoto lens. Long range. Intimate. Rose's blood turned cold. "Jesus," she whispered. "I don't know how she got it," Julian said. "I've only seen one person out there with you." Rose sat down hard beside him. "She's watching us. Maybe always has been." The quiet between them now wasn't romantic. It was real. Weighty. "I thought this place was safe," she said. Julian ran a hand through his hair. "There's no such thing. Not with people like her involved." "And you're bored?" she asked. "Will they see this?" "They already have." The emergency call came at dawn. Julian stood in the conference room, wearing yesterday's shirt, hair uncombed, exhaustion clinging to him like smoke. The Mirage board was gathered on video boxes of suits and expensive lighting, glaring down at him like gods from Olympus. Veronica had sent them the leak directly. The still, the headline, the edited narration, all implying impropriety, irresponsibility, and romantic distraction. And worse, that Julian was using foundation funds to bankroll a personal relationship. He tried to explain. "She's a scientist," he said. "This isn't a relationship. It's research. It's conservation. It's real." Everett Cho didn't blink. And yet the optics suggest otherwise. "She didn't ask for this," Julian snapped. "She's not a liability." "I am." Serena Kwan leaned forward in her video box. "Which is precisely why we're calling for your resignation, at least temporarily, from all Mirage-related oversight." Julian froze. "You want me to step down from the one place I finally tried to fix?" "You've become the story," Serena said coolly. "That's unacceptable." Julian's knuckles whitened against the edge of the table. "Give us the Mirage," Everett said. "Let Belmont take it. You walk away clean." Quiet. He stared at the screen, rage simmering beneath practiced composure. Then he clicked end call without a word. That evening, Rose found him on the rooftop of the main lodge, alone with a glass of rye and a view of dusk unraveling across the desert like spilled ink. "I saw the feed," she said quietly. "I didn't give them the photo." "I know." He took a long drink. "They want me out." "What will you do?" Julian stared into the distance, voice quiet. "They want me to be predictable. Discreet. Broken in the right way." "And are you?" He looked at her. "I don't know yet." A hawk spiraled overhead in widening circles, its cry cutting through the evening silence. Below them, The greenhouse glowed soft as a lantern, and the roses stubborn. Glorious breathed in the night air. "You don't have to protect me," Rose said. "I've done this alone for a long time." Julian shook his head. "I'm not protecting you. I'm standing beside you." "That's different." She hesitated, then sat beside him, shoulder brushing his. And for the first time since the scandal began, Julian felt something like stillness. Not absence. Not escape. Stillness. Rooted and unafraid. Hours later, when the lights dimmed and the mirage fell into silence, a black SUV pulled up the unmarked road at the base of the southern ridge. Inside, Veronica Chase reviewed her latest edits on a tablet, zooming in, layering audio, distorting lighting just enough to imply what wasn't there. She smiled. Scandals sold best when truth blurred with suggestion. And this story? This story was gold. Chapter 4. Desert Heartbeats. The desert storm rolled in like a forgotten god, slow at first, sulking on the horizon in shades of ochre and ash. By mid-afternoon, the sky had dimmed to a bruised sepia. The wind arrived next, sharp gusts that whipped through mesquite and shook the greenhouse panels like bones rattling in a crypt. Julian stood beneath the dome's central arch, a wrench in one hand, staring upward as the sky turned the color of dried blood. "Tell me this is normal," he called out. "It's monsoon season," Rose shouted back from across the greenhouse, pulling canvas over the propagation tables. "Welcome to Arizona. Feels less like weather and more like a threat." "That's because it is." Outside, the gusts howled louder. Gravel skated across the walkways. The greenhouse lights flickered, then held. Rose moved with practiced urgency, battening down vents, protecting fragile hybrids. Julian, surprisingly, kept up. He tightened fasteners, steadied top-heavy pots. Sweat soaked his collar. Dust clung to his skin. Then, like a switch flipped, the rain came. Sheets of it. Heavy and punishing, slamming into the glass above like war drums. Inside the greenhouse, everything went still. The sound drowned everything but breath. Julian exhaled. "So, we're trapped? Until it passes. How long?" She looked up at the sky. Now a violent watercolor of black and rust. Could be an hour. Could be all night. Julian gave a half-smile. "I've been in worse lockdowns." Rose arched a brow. "With room service, I'm sure." They sat near the rear alcove, where the rarest roses grew under soft violet light. The storm raged beyond the glass, wrapping the dome in sound and shadow. Julian leaned back on his palms, shirt damp, face flushed. "You always look this calm when the world's ending?" "I live in a desert," Rose said. "Adaptation is survival." He watched her as she moved graceful without trying. Presence rooted like the plants she loved. "Can I ask you something?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Why here? Why this place? You're brilliant. You could be tenured at Berkeley, running a lab in New York." "I don't want to live under fluorescent lights," she said simply. "And I don't want to talk about climate from a podium while the earth withers outside the window." She ran a finger over the rim of a clay pot. "My mother was a florist. Tucson born and raised. I grew up in a shop that smelled like lilies and loam. She taught me how to listen to plants, how to grieve through them." I buried her with a desert marigold pressed to her chest. Julian's throat tightened. "You were close." "She was everything," Rose whispered. Silence passed between them, deep and oddly soft, like velvet pulled tight. "Your father?" she asked. He exhaled a hollow laugh. "My father is legacy first, son second. I was raised on first-class flights and boardrooms. Love came with conditions. Success meant obedience." "Did you obey?" "For a while," he said. "Then I got good at pretending." Rose studied him in the dim light. There was something naked in his honesty, raw and unguarded in a way she didn't expect. She shifted slightly, turning toward him. "You hide it well." "The cracks." He gave her a smile, sad and intimate. "So do you." The storm surged again, slamming the greenhouse with a wind gust so loud they both startled. A single pot tipped near the edge of the room, shattering against the tile. Rose jumped to her feet. That was the hybrid. But Julian was already there. He crouched, carefully lifting the plant from the broken shards. Dirt spilled over his palms, dark and fragrant. He held it out to her like a child, offering something sacred. Rose's breath caught. The rose's root ball was intact, fragile, but unharmed. She reached for it, and for the briefest moment, their hands met earthy and trembling. Her fingers lingered on his wrist. Julian looked up, their faces inches apart. There it was. That pause before the world tilts. Neither of them spoke. She moved first, reaching out, brushing soil from his temple with her thumb. He didn't flinch. He didn't breathe. Then, slowly, like petals unfurling beneath moonlight, their mouths found each other. The kiss was not soft. It was real, laced with fatigue and adrenaline, salt and dust. It pressed into the quiet desperation of two people who had forgotten what it meant to be seen, truly seen, and found it here, against all odds, in a storm-lit greenhouse surrounded by roses that shouldn't exist. They broke apart with a gasp. Rose stepped back. Julian's eyes searched hers. I didn't plan that. Neither did I. The rain slowed above them, gentler now. The storm was passing. But something else had begun. The storm receded slowly, like a tide pulling memory back into the desert floor. Outside the dome, water streamed off the curved glass in glistening rivulets. The air inside had grown thick with petrichor, and the scent of wet roses heady and intoxicating, like a secret garden catching its breath. Julian still stood where she'd left him, lips parted, expression unreadable. The kiss lingered between them, unspoken but undeniable. Rose moved first. She walked to the bench near the trellis and sat, keeping her hands in her lap as if anchoring herself. She stared at the ground, then at the flickering grow light above. I'm sorry, she said softly. For what? Julian asked, voice low. For confusing things. He walked over and sat beside her, not too close, but near enough that she could feel the pull of his warmth. You didn't confuse anything, he said. You clarified it. Rose gave a small, tired laugh. I've been here 3 years, Julian. Working. Saving something no one else cared about. This greenhouse is the only thing that's made sense in a long time. You think I'm going to ruin it? She looked at him now, really looked. No. I think I already let you in too far. Julian's expression shifted pain. Then something quieter. I've spent most of my life wanting to be let in, he said. But once I am, I never know what to do with it. I usually screw it up. Spectacularly. Then maybe don't, she whispered. That hung between them, raw and real. No performance. No agenda. Just the hope that maybe, for once, the past didn't have to dictate the ending. They sat in silence for a long time, surrounded by the gentle hum of the irrigation system and the slow drip of water off glass. Julian leaned back against the bench, closing his eyes. Can I tell you something I've never said out loud? Rose glanced sideways, curious. He opened his eyes and stared at the domed ceiling. I hate being seen. Not noticed I know how to work a room, but truly seen. Every time someone's tried, they've either wanted something or ended up disappointed. Rose's chest tightened. Then you've never had the right people seeing you. He looked at her, and in that look, something shifted. Not heat, not attraction, though those were there, too, but something gentler. Recognition. A shared loneliness. No longer alone. They spent the next hour talking in slow layers. Rose spoke of her years at university, of the professor who told her she'd never be taken seriously because her research was too romantic. Of applying for 27 grants and being denied 23. Of how she'd come to the Mirage not for fame but refuge. Julian listened, rapt. Asked questions. Laughed at the right moments. Grew quiet when she mentioned her mother's death again. Did you love her? He asked gently. Rose blinked, surprised. Of course. Some people don't love their parents. They survive them. Rose nodded. She wasn't perfect, but she believed in me, even when I didn't. Julian smiled faintly. I envy that. He told her about boarding schools, about hollow applause at foundation galas, about how every room he entered was filled with either admiration or judgment, never understanding. And then I got good at being what they expected, he said. The smile, the scandal, the air. Rose tilted her head. But here, you're just... Julian. He chuckled. Still a bit scandalous. Only mildly. They smiled. And in that smile, something new began to bloom. Not infatuation. Not fantasy. Trust. By the time the sky began to clear, stars blinked faintly through the last veils of storm cloud. Moonlight returned in slivers. Rose walked to the central console and checked the irrigation reset. Looks like the system survived, she said. Thanks to you, Julian added. She turned, arms crossed. You helped. Only because you told me how. Rose hesitated. You could stay here longer, you know. Julian raised a brow. In the greenhouse? In the mirage? This resort isn't just land. It could be something better. He exhaled. They'll fight me. Then fight back. She said it like it was simple. And maybe it was? With her beside him. Later, as they stepped out of the dome into the cool, post-storm night, the roses behind them gleamed under soft lighting, wet, defiant, impossibly alive. Julian reached for her hand. She let him. No kiss. No promises, just fingers laced through fingers. A quiet agreement. A seed planted. And under the desert stars, it began to grow. Chapter 5. Embers and Echoes. Julian Sinclair had never been very good at normal. He could host a gala with 10 minutes' notice, negotiate a multi-million-dollar contract in 3 languages, and walk into a ballroom with the kind of presence that made camera flashes pop on instinct. But now, here he was barefoot, coffee mug in hand, standing in Rose Martinez's makeshift research lab, utterly unsure of what to do with his hands, or his heart. The morning after the storm was quiet, golden, soft-edged. Mirage retreat, soaked in last night's rain, smelled of warmed stone and creosote. Birdsong filtered through the open windows. Somewhere, a water line hissed softly back to life. Julian stared at a clipboard covered in meticulous notes. So, all this is about the rose pollen, ratios, and viability? Rose looked up from her stool near the sink, still in her worn chambray shirt, sleeves rolled, face flushed from an early start. You say that like pollen's not sexy. Julian smirked. I never said that. She grinned, but the exhaustion showed in her eyes. Dark circles, muscle tension. You didn't sleep, he said. I had work. You always have work. Rose stood, stretching. It matters. I didn't say it didn't. You don't have to. I can see it on your face. Julian's jaw tensed. I just meant, you can let me help. You don't have to carry everything. She softened, just a little. It's not that simple. Maybe it is. Maybe you've just never had someone try. They stood there a moment, not quite touching. Something unspoken quivered in the space between them. Then the front door creaked open. And with it, the heat returned. Veronica Chase did not knock. She never had, and she never would. Knocking implied permission. Veronica didn't ask. She breezed into the greenhouse like she owned the air, her sunglasses reflecting every corner of the room, heels clicking against tile despite the posted "No Outside Shoes" sign. Well, she drawled, surveying the setup, if it isn't Eden and the exile. Julian turned, immediately rigid. Veronica. Julian, she said smoothly, peeling off her glasses. I do love a man who trades penthouses for potting soil. So rustic. Rose stiffened, eyes narrowing. This is a research site. You're not supposed to be here. Veronica ignored her. Oh, but I am supposed to be here. On assignment. See, there's a story blooming here, and I'm nothing if not devoted to my readership. Julian stepped forward. Leave. She tilted her head. You always did have a temper. But careful now, every move you make is a headline. I said leave. Veronica pulled a folded paper from her purse and placed it delicately on the table. The front page of a glossy print tabloid, a zoomed-in, low-angle shot of Rose and Julian in the greenhouse during the storm. His hand on hers. Her face turned toward him. Intimate. Beautiful. And entirely out of context. Billionaire's botanist. Julian Sinclair's desert distraction. I haven't published the rest, she said, voice purring now. Not yet. but the full footage is exquisite. Rain. Roses. Forbidden longing. It writes itself. Rose's voice was a blade. Get out. Veronica turned, smirking. Careful, Dr. Martinez. Don't forget everything has roots. Even secrets. She left, sunlight slicing through the door behind her like a wound. For a long time, neither of them moved. Julian stared at the tabloid on the table, jaw clenched so tightly he thought he might break something. Rose was already moving, collecting samples, wiping down surfaces, anything to keep her hands busy. She's bluffing, Julian said, trying to scare us. She's not bluffing, Rose replied, and she's already scared me. Julian looked at her. I won't let her drag you through this. You can't stop it. I'll protect you. You don't get to promise that, she snapped, spinning toward him. You don't know what it's like to have your work dismissed as infatuation. To be reduced to someone's distraction. Julian flinched. She saw it. Regret flickered across her face. I'm sorry, she said. That wasn't fair. Julian stepped closer. Maybe not. But you're right. You didn't ask for any of this. No, she whispered. But it found me anyway. They stood in the hush of the aftermath. The greenhouse glowed faintly with filtered sun, the roses still recovering from the storm. Julian reached for her hand. Then let me be something good that finds you. She looked at him, and for once didn't pull away. That night, Julian wandered alone through the villa corridors, mind racing, his body still hummed with her touch. Her words, but his head was already spinning with strategy. Veronica was escalating. The board was restless. He was running out of time. He paused at the edge of the rose beds, where the rarest blooms opened under starshine. The air smelled of citrus and soil. He crouched, fingertips grazing a bud, just starting to turn. He thought of his mother, of how she'd once told him, real love doesn't glitter. It grows. He hadn't understood it then. He did now. His phone buzzed. A message from Everett Chow. Final vote. Noon tomorrow. Remote dial-in. You have one chance to fix this, Julian. Or we walk. Julian stared at the screen. And then, without hesitation, he deleted the message. They would not decide his fate. Not anymore. By morning, the heat had returned with a vengeance. It pressed against the glass of the greenhouse like a warning, heavy and relentless, wrapping the entire Mirage retreat in shimmering haze. Rose wiped sweat from her brow as she refilled the misting system, but her hands were shaking. She hadn't told Julian. Not yet. Not about what she'd found on her university inbox this morning, an anonymous tip, unsigned but very pointed. Thought you should know the Sinclair Foundation is under review for fund misuse. Maybe check who's redirecting money into your roses before you lose your license. She knew who had sent it. Veronica Chase didn't always sign her poison. She let others drink it slowly. Rose leaned against the sink and closed her eyes. The glass dome around her, usually a sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage, beautiful, delicate, and transparent. She trusted Julian. Didn't she? The kiss still burned on her lips, but the fallout was smudging everything. The story was no longer just about endangered roses or sanctuary science. Now she was the distraction, a narrative footnote to someone else's mess. And worse, she could lose everything if this spiraled further. Meanwhile, Julian stood at the edge of the dried-up fountain in the main courtyard, face turned toward the sun, expression unreadable. He hadn't slept. Not after deleting Everett's message. Not after making the second call to a number that still lived in his memory, though he hadn't dialed it in years. Hi, it's Julian. Yes, that Julian. I need a favor. Big one. On the other end, a chuckle, then a cautious, you must be desperate. Julian replied, I am. He stared at the empty fountain now, remembering how his mother used to sit beside it with a sketch pad. The roses in the greenhouse had been her idea, a desert Eden, built not for profit but for beauty, for healing, for hope. He couldn't let the board sell this place off to the highest bidder, not after what Rose had poured into it, not after what they had started to grow here. He tapped his phone and pulled up his notes. If the board wouldn't listen to integrity, he'd force them to listen to leverage. He was going to buy the Mirage. Alone. Rose found him an hour later in the lodge kitchen. Sleeves rolled, apron slightly askew, hands dusted in flour. He looked more like a wayward cooking show contestant than a hotel heir. She blinked. "Are you baking?" He looked up, sheepish. "Don't ask." "I just did. It's my mother's recipe," he muttered. "Scones. Lemon thyme." I needed to think. She crossed her arms. "You could have just journaled." He looked at her carefully. "You're mad." "I'm scared." She held up her phone, showed him the email. Julian's face fell. "Veronica's pulling strings with academic institutions now?" he asked, voice tight. "She's painting me as a co-conspirator," Rose said, "which means the board won't just come after you. They'll come after the institute, the greenhouse, everything. I'll fix it. You keep saying that because it's true." "But how, Julian?" Her voice cracked. "How do you fix something that people are already convinced is broken?" He came around the counter, flour on his palms, face raw. "Because I'm going to take the Mirage from the board." Rose stared. "What?" "I have inheritance funds I've never touched. Legacy accounts from my mother's estate. It's enough to outbid Belmont. If I act now quietly, I can buy the board out, dissolve their hold, and reconstitute the Mirage as an independent entity." She was silent. He went on. "And once that's done, I'll protect the foundation. The roses. You. No matter what Veronica spins, no one will be able to touch this place again." "But Julian," Rose said softly, "you'd be burning every bridge you have left." He smiled, tired. "Then I'll plant new ones." That night, Rose wandered the greenhouse alone. She checked the temperature sensors, monitored the irrigation flow. Everything was in working order. Everything looked healthy. But she couldn't settle. Julian's plan was bold, noble, self-destructive. And for the first time since the storm, she wondered, was this love, or was it desperation wearing a charming face? She reached the trellis, fingers tracing the spine of a newly budding rose. Julian had called this one Perseverance. It had taken root in the worst soil, against all odds. He had named it after her, half-jokingly. She touched the stem and felt a thorn prick her skin. Not enough to bleed. Just enough to feel it. Behind her, something shifted in the dark. She turned sharply but saw nothing. Just the curve of the dome and the hush of crickets outside. Still, she didn't shake the feeling. Someone had been watching. Again. Elsewhere, on a bluff overlooking the back fence of Mirage Retreat, Veronica Chase lowered her binoculars and smiled. She'd heard everything. Julian's plan, his confession, and most importantly, Rose's hesitation. Exactly what she needed. The story would write itself now. Her next move would break them. Not with scandal. With doubt. Chapters say, Mirage collapse. The footage dropped just after dawn. It started as a whisper, an early morning headline buried on page 3 of a niche celebrity gossip site, but within the hour, it had ignited like wildfire across the internet. By breakfast, it had gone global. Julian was still in bed when his phone buzzed. Dozens of messages. One from Everett Chow. "You did this to yourself." He opened the link. The video autoplayed, dim and grainy, the color muted like a memory, shot from a long lens, edited artfully with voiceover, ominous strings, and slow zooms. It captured him and Rose in the greenhouse, in the aftermath of the storm. Damp skin, flushed cheeks, too close. Their kiss framed like a cinematic climax. His whispered words, distorted and enhanced. "Let me be something good that finds you." Julian's stomach dropped. The audio had been enhanced, re-edited. It wasn't fake, but it wasn't true either. It had been bent, just enough to snap the truth in half. He tried calling Rose. No answer. He swore, pulled on a shirt, and ran. Rose had seen it hours before. She sat alone in the propagation lab, phone face down beside her, spine straight as steel. The worst part wasn't the footage. It was that she remembered the moment and had wanted it. Melt it. And now it had been taken, turned into spectacle. Reduced. By loving him, she'd become a headline. The worst kind. There was a knock at the greenhouse door. A junior staffer stood there, barely 20, wide-eyed and shaken. "Dr. Martinez? I was told to tell you. The university's launching a formal ethics inquiry. Effective immediately." Rose's chest tightened. "They said your fieldwork's being flagged as compromised," the girl added, voice low. "Conflict of interest. Foundation funding, media involvement." Rose nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The girl hesitated, then handed over a clipboard. A list of press inquiries. 22 calls. 22 ways the world was asking, "Are you the mistress or the mastermind?" When Julian reached the greenhouse, Rose was already packing plastic bins, labeled folders, her laptop case zipped with finality. "Don't," he said, breathless. She didn't stop. "I didn't leak it," he said. "I know. I would never." "Julian," she snapped, finally looking at him. "I know. But it doesn't matter." He froze. Rose's face was pale, her eyes swollen with unshed tears. But her hands were steady, focused, practical, wounded in the way only professionals know how to be quietly. And with grace. "They're coming for my research," she said. "For me. I can't protect it if I stay. I'm going to fix this." "How?" Her voice cracked. "By buying the Mirage? That was never about the roses, was it? It was about your name, your guilt, your need to rewrite your story." He took a step back, as if struck. She softened. "Julian, I care about you. I do. But I've built my entire career on credibility. One mistake, one headline, and I lose it all." He shook his head. "You're not a mistake." "No," she whispered. "But this might be." They stood in silence. The dome around them felt too small now. The roses too quiet. Then, gently, Rose pressed a small flash drive into his palm. "All the notes, all the sequencing, everything we worked on. If the project goes down, keep it alive." Julian looked at the drive, then at her. His voice was a whisper. "You're leaving?" She nodded. And just like that, the greenhouse felt colder. That afternoon, the board held their emergency session. Julian dialed in from the villa office, alone. Serena Kwon's face appeared first flawless and blank. "The optics are radioactive. Julian, you know it's fake." "No," she corrected. "It's real, edited to be fatal. And the Mirage can't survive that, not with you tied to it." Everett leaned into frame. "We've arranged the Belmont sale. They'll assume full control within the month." "You did this behind my back?" Julian asked. "You left us no choice," Serena said. Julian leaned forward. "You want a statement? Here it is. I'm buying the Mirage. Solo. I'll outbid Belmont. I'll take it from you. And I'll make sure this scandal ends where it started, with Veronica Chase and her digital poison." The board didn't blink. "Serena Sayhid, if you attempt that, we'll sue for breach of fiduciary duty." "I am the Sinclair heir," Julian snapped. "My mother built this place. And now you've dismantled it," Everett said. "All for a woman." Julian's jaw clenched. Then, slowly, he disconnected the call. He stood and made another. Across the desert, under a setting sun, Rose drove north past the dusty highway markers, the Joshua trees, the sleeping quail. Her hands were steady, but her heart was splintering. She didn't look back. Not yet, because if she did, she might turn around. The Mirage's grand lobby had never seen this much press. Cameras lined the walls, their long necks craning like vultures awaiting a final gasp. Microphones clashed like swords across folding tables. Assistants whispered behind cupped hands. A single velvet rope separated Julian Sinclair from the sea of questions. He stood beneath a wrought iron chandelier, backlit by late afternoon sun spilling through the high arch windows. In the distance, the desert shimmered indifferent. This wasn't a press conference. It was a reckoning. He wore a dark tailored jacket over desert boots and linen pants. Mirage on the outside, contradictions underneath. He looked collected, but his pulse thudded behind his collar. A few more moments. Then the resort manager gave the signal. Julian stepped up to the podium. Flash popped. A whoosh fell. He looked out at the crowd, jaw clenched. His father had once told him, "Never show them what hurts. Show them what you've already outlived." But this time, he wasn't here to survive. He was here to speak. He cleared his throat. This resort Mirage retreat was founded on the belief that silence could heal, that in a world too loud to think, we need places that listen. Lately, that silence has been twisted, turned against us, manipulated by people who profit from distortion. And I've been silent too long. He paused, letting the tension sit like dust in the heat. The footage you've seen, it's real, but it's not the truth. That moment, in the greenhouse, was stolen, edited, wrapped in narrative, designed to humiliate, not illuminate. And it has put the reputation of a brilliant woman at risk, someone whose work might save species we didn't even know were dying. Whispers stirred in the crowd. Microphones inched closer. Julian looked directly into the nearest lens. Her name is Dr. Rose Martinez. She's not my scandal. She's not my story. She's the reason this resort has a future. More murmurs. He placed a document on the podium. Effective immediately, I am assuming full ownership of Mirage Retreat through private purchase, funded by a trust left to me by my mother, who envisioned this place not as a resort, but a sanctuary. Someone shouted from the press pool, "So you're not denying the relationship?" Julian paused. "No. I'm not denying anything. I'm admitting to something rare. The beginning of love, which, frankly, deserves better than to be treated like currency for gossip." A long silence followed. Even the cameras, for a second, seemed to blink slower. Then the applause began, not thunderous, but sincere. Scattered staff. 2 environmental journalists. An intern with tears in her eyes. Julian exhaled. He had no idea what would happen next. But he knew what wouldn't. Running. Rose sat on the side of the road, just south of Sedona, her phone buzzing like a live wire in her lap. A call from the university chancellor. A message from a major botanical institute in Santa Fe, offering her a safe space to finish your research. And a news alert. She tapped it. Julian's voice filled her car. Distant but steady. The speech. His stand. And then her name, spoken with reverence, without shame. She stared at the screen, chest tight. He hadn't defended himself. He'd defended her. The clip ended, but she didn't move. Just sat there, surrounded by mountains and cactus shadow, the sky bleeding gold. Then, slowly, she turned the car around. Back at the Mirage, Julian stood in the courtyard as the sun dipped low, the headlines already rewriting themselves. The board's sale would be blocked. His ownership claim, surprisingly ironclad, was being processed by legal. The staff hovered, uncertain, then grateful. But she wasn't there. And that silence, after all he'd said, cut deeper than any accusation. He walked into the greenhouse one last time. Alone. The roses glistened in the soft light, vibrant and persistent. He wandered to the trellis, hand-brushing the stem of the first hybrid she'd shown him. It pricked his thumb. He didn't flinch. Pain was part of growth. He stood there, letting the quiet settle, letting himself miss her. Then, footsteps. Behind him. Soft. Familiar. He turned. There she was. Backlit by the greenhouse door, curls tangled from wind, cheeks flushed, dust on her sleeves. She looked at him silent, searching. "Nice speech," she said finally. He smiled. "Had to do something dramatic." "You do that well." He stepped forward. "I didn't expect you to come back." "I wasn't going to," she said. "But then I realized, I'm not afraid of losing my work." "What are you afraid of?" Her eyes softened. "Losing us before it even began." A pause. Then she crossed to him and took his hand. He held her like a lifeline. Outside, the roses bloomed under a dying sun, red, gold, alive. Chapter 7. The Standstill Garden. The Mirage hadn't changed, but it had stopped holding its breath. The staff moved more easily through the halls now, greeting guests without the weight of scandal shadowing every smile. A few journalists lingered in town, but the worst of the frenzy had passed. Even the board had gone quiet, pulled back into legal strategy and silence, outmaneuvered by Julian's bold buyout. Still, the resort's heart beat slower now, like it had exhaled, but hadn't yet decided if it would inhale again. Julian stood at the edge of the rose beds in the greenhouse, hands in his pockets, staring at the trellis where it had all begun. The storm, the kiss, the collapse. Now, silence. The kind after disaster. Not quite peace. Not quite pain. Rose hadn't moved back in. She wasn't staying in her old suite, or even in the villa he'd prepared for her. She'd taken up temporary space in one of the spare research casitas, barely more than a sunroom with a bed and sink. On purpose. I need to come back slowly, she'd told him. This time, with both feet on the ground. Julian understood. He respected it. But it didn't stop him from missing her every night. Rose stood over a table of seed trays, clipboard in one hand, pen tapping absently against her thigh. The greenhouse smelled stronger these days, richer. Almost overripe. She was tracking germination on Esperanza, the hybrid that had refused to open for weeks, when she noticed something strange. A section of the soil, toward the back wall, was dry. Too dry. But not from neglect, her logs showed perfect hydration. She crouched down, brushed her hand over the top layer. It flaked away like ash. She reached deeper and hit something unexpected. Hard. Cold. Metal. Frowning, she brushed the soil aside, revealing the edge of a rusted iron latch. What the hell? She knelt, clearing more space. It was a hatch. Small, circular, hidden under the greenhouse's foundation. A lock long corroded, its handle slightly raised. Julian found her there 10 minutes later, crouched over the hatch with dirt on her knees and a determined line in her brow. He blinked. Are you digging for treasure? She gave him a sideways look. Come here. He did. Crouched beside her, squinting at the iron ring. I've never seen this, he said. But then again, I barely ever came into the greenhouse before you. Could be old irrigation, Rose guessed. But it doesn't match the maps I've seen. Maps? She pointed to a rolled blueprint on the table. Your mom's original site layout. There's no mention of a substructure beneath this section. Julian leaned back on his heels. His mother's name still struck something in him. Let's open it, he said. Rose hesitated. Shouldn't we wait? For what? She raised a brow. Moral clarity. He smiled faintly. If we waited for that, nothing would bloom. He grabbed a wrench from the nearby bench, wedged it beneath the rusted edge. With a groan of metal and a soft cough of disturbed air, the hatch gave way. A sharp, earthy smell wafted out dust, paper, and time. Beneath it, a narrow shaft, no deeper than 5 feet, steps built into the side, and at the bottom, a small wooden crate, wrapped in canvas. Julian looked at Rose. Shall we? After you. Inside the crate were files, dozens of them weathered folders, some in brittle plastic sleeves, others bound with string. Most were labeled in elegant, looping script. Julian brushed off the dust. These are my mother's notes, he whispered. Rose sat beside him on the greenhouse floor as he pulled one folder open. Inside, annotated sketches of desert flora, photos from the 1972nd and 82nd, press clippings about rare species. And in one corner, a small journal bound in sun-bleached leather. Julian opened it slowly. The 4th of April, 1989. The board rejected the sustainability proposal. Again, they think it's branding. They don't understand that it's survival. The roses bloomed this morning 2 new variants. They smell like lemon and ash. I've named one Reckoning. Rose's breath caught. Julian read silently, his brow furrowed deeper with each page. They want to sell the land behind the South Ridge. The soil holds too many secrets. I told them the land remembers. They laughed. He stopped. Your mother wasn't just a dreamer, Rose whispered. She was trying to preserve something bigger than this resort. Julian looked up, eyes haunted. She was fighting the same people I am now, only no one ever saw it. Rose reached for his hand. This time, he didn't have to ask. That night, Julian sat alone on the villa terrace, the journal in his lap, a single page marked, "The roses are changing. They're adapting faster than I expected. If something happens to me." The sentence ended in a smudge. Ink, water, or something heavier. Julian traced the line with one finger. The past wasn't dead. It had been buried. And now it was blooming again. The morning sun filtered through the greenhouse dome in fractured beams, casting pale gold across Rose's notes and Julian's mother's journal. They had moved their work table beside the hatch, the crate of documents spread open between half-studied rose cuttings and a thermos of lukewarm coffee. They read in silence. Each page peeled back a truth they hadn't been prepared to find. The resort board wants to develop the southern flats. It's not just short-sighted, it's dangerous. The native flora there is reactive. The desert has memory, and we're on the edge of disturbing something we can't replace. I collected samples from beneath the ridge. Several contain unknown alkaloids, potential anti-inflammatory properties. I've sent word to the Botanical Institute in Tucson. No reply. Someone is intercepting the reports. If Mirage fails, let the roses speak for me. Julian's eyes moved slowly across the page. She wasn't just preserving the roses. She was protecting something. Rose nodded. There's something under the southern flats she didn't want exposed. Something biological? Or political? They exchanged a look. Then Rose stood. We need to see it. The southern flats had once been slated for expansion, a line of private villas and a solar spa that never made it past the architectural sketch stage. Now, it was an empty slope of cracked soil and tough-rooted desert shrubs where the wind whispered louder than the birds. Julian hadn't walked this far out in years. Rose led the way, her boots crunching over dry gravel, journal in one hand, handheld soil scanner in the other. The air out here felt different, warmer. But not from the sun. Thicker, somehow, watchful. They stopped near a cluster of ironwood trees. Rose knelt and dug her fingers into the soil, then turned on the scanner. A few beeps. Then, anomaly detected. Julian crouched beside her. She looked up. There's a concentration of mineral irregularities. And something organic. Deep. How deep? At least 8 feet. Julian ran a hand through his hair. You think she was hiding a discovery? Rose's voice was quiet. I think she was documenting something no one else would believe. They sat in silence for a moment, beneath a wind-worn sky, surrounded by land too old to forget. Julian's voice was raw. She died too young. Everyone said it was illness. But she'd stopped writing completely the last 2 months before she passed. No journals. No entries. Nothing. You think it was connected? I don't know what to think. He looked at Rose. I just know I want to finish what she started. Rose touched his hand. Then we do it together. That evening, they moved the documents to a secure digital archive, Rose scanning each page meticulously, Julian cataloging cross-references. They discovered coded notes in the margins, dates, chemical formulas, even GPS coordinates. The further they went, the more they found mentions of silent corporate offers to buy Mirage, research institutions discrediting her findings, letters returned unopened. She was silenced, Rose said. By my own family, Julian added bitterly. No, Rose corrected. By the world that hated what she knew. Julian was quiet. Then, do you think we should go public? Rose looked up. What do you think? If we do, they'll say I'm inventing conspiracy theories to rehab my image, that I'm dragging a dead woman's name through the dirt. And if we don't? He exhaled. Then everything she fought for stays buried. Rose nodded. We go public, she said. But she knew deep down they would pay for it. Later that night, after Julian had gone to his villa to sleep, Rose remained behind, organizing the last batch of scans. The greenhouse was quiet, save for the hum of the irrigation system and the rustle of dry leaves. She sat in the soft glow of the computer screen, watching the digitized pages flicker by like ghosted memories. Then she heard it. A soft, distinct click, outside the greenhouse. She froze. The sound came again, closer this time. Then silence. She stood, slowly, heart in her throat, peered through the greenhouse glass. Nothing but cactus, shadows, and moonlight. But she knew. Someone was out there, still watching, still listening, still waiting. And far beyond the resort, in a private office half lit by screens and desert dusk, Veronica Chase sat back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. She had intercepted the GPS coordinates embedded in Julian's upload. And what she saw? That was the real story. Not the kiss, not the scandal, but the secret under the roses, and it was going to make her a legend. Chapter 8. Petals in the Fire. The Mirage lobby hadn't felt this electric in weeks. Guests were gathering in hushed clusters, murmuring around their phones. Staff traded glances between reception and the bar. Even the roses in the entryway, fresh from the greenhouse, carefully arranged by Rose just 2 days ago, seemed to shrink under the weight of tension in the air. Julian stood at the center of it all. Still, silent, waiting. Rose stood beside him, her hand loosely in his, not clinging. Just there, steady, present. On the mounted flat screen, Veronica Chase's face lit up, painted in perfect light, framed in studio chic minimalism. She sat in a black leather chair on the set of Desert Line Weekly, the same show that had once praised Julian as the next king of American hospitality. Now, she was holding court. "Let's talk about Mirage," Veronica said, voice syrup smooth. "A resort that's no stranger to controversy, but perhaps one stranger to truth." The screen behind her changed. Satellite images. Historical soil survey. Photos pulled from Julian's mother's journals, some they hadn't even released yet. Rose inhaled sharply. "She has the research. All of it. Thanks to an anonymous source," Veronica continued. "We now know that the southern edge of the Mirage Retreat was the site of undeclared botanical experimentation going back decades, the kind of work that towed the line between visionary and unethical." Julian's eyes narrowed. "She's going to spin it. Environmental secrecy, unapproved field testing, possible toxic interactions with native species," Veronica said. And at the center of this legacy, Julian Sinclair, heir to a crumbling empire, desperately clinging to his mother's myth, propping up a scientist whose credentials are now fairly or not under review. Rose's hand went cold in his. Julian turned to her. "Don't listen to her. She has the footage. The files. She's controlling the story." Then we take it back. 30 minutes later, they were in the greenhouse, door locked, computers booted, cameras rolling. Rose stood behind the research bench. Julian paced nearby, sleeves rolled, phone pressed to his ear. "Live stream?" Rose asked. Julian nodded. "We go direct. No edits. No headlines. Just truth." He clicked off the call. The greenhouse looked like a war room, half lit, lined with notes, USB drives, and thumbtacked photographs of desert flora and faded journal scans. They didn't have a studio. They didn't need one. They had the roses. The greenhouse glowed behind them as the camera began to roll. Julian faced it first. "You've heard Veronica Chase's version of the Mirage story. This is ours." He stepped aside. Rose leaned forward, voice calm, slow, rooted in the same authority that made the roses bloom for her. "I'm Dr. Rose Martinez. I'm not an influencer. I'm not a mistress. I'm a botanist. And for the last 3 years, I've been studying an endangered rose species that blooms nowhere else on Earth. My work has been fully documented, peer-reviewed, and independently verified." She held up a journal. "These are the field notes of Camille Sinclair. In them, you'll see what her board ignored. Data on climate resilience, native seed adaptation, and yes, evidence that her research may have led to rare medicinal properties being buried beneath the southern flats." Julian took over again. This resort was never meant to be an empire. It was meant to be a refuge for species, for stories. For people like my mother, who refused to let short-term profits erase long-term survival. Veronica Chase didn't uncover a scandal. She stole a legacy, and now she's trying to bury it under innuendo. Rose stepped beside him. But we're not letting that happen. The feed ended 30 minutes later. Within 10 minutes, it had 30,000 views. Within an hour, the resort was trending not as a scandal site, but as a preservation battleground. Veronica Chase threw a glass of white wine at her assistant's feet. You tell me how they got that live stream up before the embargo lifted. The assistant stammered. They went through a decentralized botanical journal site. It's tied to a university consortium. It's not traditional media, there's no block on it. Veronica swore. She turned back to the screen. There they were, Julian and Rose bathed in greenhouse light like some mythical pairing. Truth, lit soft and golden. The public wasn't mocking them. It was listening. And worse? It was believing. Veronica sat down, hard, her fingers white around the armrest. This wasn't just about Julian anymore. It was about control. And if she couldn't ruin them with the past, she'd break them with the present. That night, as the desert wind softened and the stars came out one by one like a slow confession, Julian and Rose stood on the greenhouse balcony, side by side. They didn't speak much. There was too much left hanging in the air between them, the backlash to come, the scientists who would dismiss them, the investors who'd quietly begun calling. But there was also hope, real hope. People had listened. Some had reached out. Botanists, journalists, a group of students offering to volunteer for a legacy restoration internship. Rose rested her head on Julian's shoulder. I'm scared, she said. He kissed her hair. So am I, he whispered. But I'm more scared of not doing this. The roses beneath them rustled in the wind, quiet and alive. Still here. Still growing. The sun rose red the next morning like an omen. Julian had barely slept. The greenhouse had become the beating heart of the mirage, but today it pulsed with anticipation rather than peace. Outside, more reporters had arrived. Some curious, others circling like hyenas waiting for a stumble. Rose moved between tables with practiced calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. Something in her had changed since the live stream, her spine straighter, her voice sharper. Not just defending herself, but claiming her ground. And yet, she hadn't told Julian about the email. Not yet. It had come at midnight, from the University of New Mexico. We'd like to formally offer you a tenured faculty position leading our desert botanical research program. With full control of your lab, a $300 Kelvin grant to continue the Rosa Mirabilis work, and an opportunity to publish. It was everything she'd once dreamed of. But it meant leaving Mirage, leaving Julian, and it meant accepting that what they'd built together might just be a chapter, not the ending. She didn't tell him that as she handed him a cup of coffee, their fingers brushing. Instead, she just said, "You're meeting her today, aren't you?" Julian nodded. "Don't let her spin it. She doesn't get to anymore." The cafe across from Mirage was small, designed to be quaint for tourists who wanted rustic charm without real discomfort. Veronica Chase arrived precisely on time, dressed like the desert couldn't touch her. Black wrap dress, not a single strand of hair out of place, red lipstick like blood drawn in a perfect line. Julian was already seated. He didn't stand a frown. "You're lucky I agreed to this," she said, sliding into the booth opposite him. "You agreed because you're losing the story," he replied. She smirked. "You think one live stream rewrites the truth?" "No," Julian said, voice low and even. "But it reminded people what truth looks like." Veronica leaned forward. "You really think people care about some dead woman's journals and a field of overhyped flowers? They don't want science. They want scandal." He met her chaze. "Then write a better one." She blinked. Julian continued. "Write about a place trying to change. Write about resilience. Write about a man who finally stopped being the board's errand boy. Write about a woman who saved something ancient in a world obsessed with the new." Veronica's lip curled. "You think I'm sentimental?" "I think you're scared," he said, "because you've built your career on other people's ruin. And now, we're refusing to fall." Veronica glanced out the window. Paparazzi waited across the street. But something was shifting and she could feel it. She'd expected Julian to beg. She hadn't expected him to fight. He slid something across the table. A packet. Thin. Sealed. "What's this?" "An NDA. She scoffed. Julian nodded toward it. You'll sign it. In exchange, you get the exclusive not on the scandal, but on the conservation initiative. You'll get first look at the full data set, access to the team, and the inside story of how the Mirage became the country's first eco-luxury desert reserve. You want to turn my fire into a PR tour? I want you to stop burning everything to feel powerful. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Veronica smiled thin and sharp. You really are your mother's son. Julian didn't smile back. And you'll never forgive me for it. She left the packet on the table. Didn't say yes. Didn't say no. But for the first time in months, Julian walked away from a conversation with her without feeling small. Rose watched him from the balcony above as he crossed the courtyard, sun cutting gold lines across his jacket, wind in his hair. She still hadn't told him. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the university. Deadline to accept offer. 48 hours. She looked down at the roses blooming beneath the balcony, Esperanza among them. It had finally opened overnight. Pale, defiant, and somehow calm, like it had been waiting for her to believe it could. Julian reached her moments later. She won't print it, he said. At least, not the way she wanted to. I think we've outgrown her reach. Rose nodded. Good. But he saw the flicker in her eyes. What is it? He asked. She handed him her phone. He read the offer in silence. When he looked up, his eyes were steady. You should take it. Her heart sank. That's not what I wanted you to say, she whispered. He took her hand. I don't want you to leave. But I'll never be the man who asks you to shrink. A pause. Then, so if this is the next step, I'll help you pack. She shook her head. That's not what I want either. Then what do you want? She stepped forward, cupped his cheek. To stop choosing between what I love and who I love. Julian's breath caught. You don't have to pick, he said. She smiled. Then maybe we find a way to have both. That night, beneath the stars, they stood barefoot in the greenhouse. She showed him Esperanza. Now in full bloom, he kissed her beneath it. Not a kiss of apology, but one of promise. And outside the glass, beyond the soil and the silence, the world waited to hear what would grow next. Chapter 9. Rain in the Desert. Rain came to the desert on the morning of the grand reopening. Not much, just a soft, silver mist that fell like a blessing over the adobe roofs, the cactus arms, and the red clay walkways of Mirage Retreat. It slicked the edges of palm fronds, collected in quiet droplets on sun-bleached patio stones, and made the roses glow. Julian stood on the lodge balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sky soften into the pale blush of dawn. The air smelled different today. Cleaner. Charged. He smiled to himself. Even the weather's in on it. Below, staff moved through the courtyard in crisp uniforms, laying out welcome bundles of desert herbs, woven straw fans, and wax-sealed letters introducing guests to the new Mirage, a place for purpose. Photographers snapped details. A drone buzzed overhead, catching aerial shots of the newly landscaped rose beds and the glassy serenity of the infinity pool now flanked by signs in both English and Spanish. This resort grows what it preserves. Behind Julian, someone stepped onto the balcony. Rose. Hair pulled into a loose braid, linen tunic splattered with soil, sandals still wet from an early stroll through the greenhouse. She carried a single rose in one hand. Esperanza. Now dried and pressed. Its petals intact. A memento of what they'd fought for. He turned. Morning, doctor. She kissed his cheek. Morning. Founder. They looked out together over the waking retreat. Guests were arriving slowly, quietly. No flash. No frenzy. The media had moved on. Veronica had published her last Mirage piece, a strangely neutral feature for modern Earth titled, From Scandal to Stewardship. How Mirage became the desert's most important conservation hotel. No apologies. But no more fire, either. She didn't torch us, Rose said now. No, Julian agreed. Just tried to build her own headline garden. I'd call that growth. They stood in easy silence, shoulder to shoulder. So, Julian said, tilting his head toward her. "You staying?" She smirked, still deciding. He grinned, but there was a flicker of truth beneath it. Rose leaned her head against his shoulder. "UNM gave me an alternative." Julian turned to look at her, surprised. "They offered to sponsor a field station here, half the time at the Mirage, half remote lecturing. Shared grant between the university and our institute." His eyes widened. "You said yes?" "I said I'd think about it." He laughed. "You love torturing me, don't you?" Rose smiled, eyes bright. "No. I love options." By noon, the retreat buzzed with soft energy. Not the chaotic glamour of its early years, but something calmer, rooted. Couples sipped dessert tea beneath acacia trees. Guests toured the solar-lit greenhouse with local ecology guides. The kitchen served dishes sourced entirely within a 100-mile radius. Mesquite flatbread, roasted prickly pear, cactus blossom salads. The air held no tension, only quiet movement. Rose led a panel in the greenhouse titled, "What the Desert Remembers." She stood in front of a diverse group: students, guests, visiting botanists, and held up Julian's mother's journal. "This isn't science fiction," she said. "It's science we chose to forget. The desert doesn't give up its secrets easily. But if you listen long enough, it speaks." Julian watched from the back, standing beside a tall cactus and smiling like a man watching something rare and beautiful. He didn't dare touch too quickly. He didn't need to interrupt. He was just there. And that was enough. That evening, as twilight turned the resort rose gold and the mist faded into cool desert wind, the first real rain of the season arrived. A sudden downpour. Guests cheered as droplets bounced off adobe walls. Staff scrambled to cover seating areas. The scent of creosote and citrus filled the air. Julian found Rose barefoot near the south path, laughing as water soaked her shirt, her braid clinging to her neck. "You know," she said, voice raised over the patter, "desert rain is never just rain." "No? It's permission." He stepped forward, hair dripping, shoes already ruined. "Permission for what?" She didn't answer. She just reached for him. He pulled her close. They kissed, soaked, laughing, alive. No stolen camera. No spotlight. Just rain, and roses, and something stronger than both. Hope. The rain tapered into a soft hush just after sundown. Clouds broke apart like petals, revealing a sky spangled with stars, clean, cold, and impossibly clear. Mirage Retreat glistened in their aftermath. The adobe bricks were darkened. The walkways glowed with fresh water sheen, and every rose in the garden looked dipped in moonlight. Julian stood at the center of the grand terrace, facing the small crowd gathered for the evening's final event, the rededication ceremony of the Sinclair greenhouse. No press, no cameras, just staff, friends, guests, and Rose standing near the steps, her cheeks flushed, arms loosely crossed, smile hidden but ready. Julian took the mic. "I used to believe Mirage was a mistake," he began, voice low and steady. "A failed investment, a forgotten project from another time." A few guests chuckled gently. He smiled. "But this place, it has a way of teaching you what matters. Not through ambition, not through fame, but through quiet, through persistence, through people like the one who rebuilt it from the roots up." He looked toward Rose. "Tonight, I want to share something with you, not a pitch, not a rebrand. A beginning." He stepped aside and pulled the tarp from a carved sandstone plaque. The engraved text read, "The Sinclair Martinez Botanical Institute, in honor of what blooms through truth, not image. Founded 2025. Rose's hand flew to her mouth. The crowd gasped, then applauded. Julian turned to her, eyes soft. "This isn't just a greenhouse anymore," he said. "It's a living institute, educational, research-driven, open to students, scientists, and dreamers alike." He paused. "And you'll lead it." Rose stepped forward, stunned. "Julian, there's no board," he added. "Just a garden. A cause. And you." She laughed, a wet, joyful, almost disbelieving sound. "You're serious." "Terrifyingly so." She touched the plaque, fingers trembling over her name. "This wasn't in the plan," she whispered. He stepped close. "Neither were you. But I can't imagine the future without either." The applause softened. The moment narrowed into a single breath between them, and then Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out a small ring box, unpolished wood, hand-carved, simple and sure. Rose's eyes widened. "Don't panic," he said. "It's not a marriage proposal." She tilted her head. "No? It's an invitation," he said, opening the box. Inside, a ring crafted from recycled gold, shaped like a coiled vine, with a small stone that shimmered green in the light. "Emerald. Set low. Earthbound. For partnership," he said. "In all its forms." She didn't hesitate. She took the ring and slid it onto her finger. "Then let's grow something the world doesn't forget," she said. Later, when the guests drifted off and the night returned to stillness, Rose and Julian stood in the greenhouse alone. A soft hum surrounded them, fans, misters, life. They walked the rows in silence, palms brushing now and then. The roses didn't need tending tonight. They just needed presence. "I was scared," Rose admitted as they reached the trellis. "Me too," Julian said. "I thought the love would get in the way of the work. And I thought the work would bury the love." She turned to him. "But now I think they're the same thing." Julian smiled. "It took a scandal, a storm, and 3,000 rose cuttings. But we got there." She kissed him then deep and slow, rooted like the desert itself. And outside, the rain returned, gentle, steady, blessing every bloom it touched. Chapter 10. The Desert Rose Institute. A year to the day since the rainstorm that changed everything, the desert had bloomed again. Wildflowers spilled across the southern flats in unruly color, scarlet and gold, violet and bone white. Native bees shimmered through Ocotillo, and the new walking trail through the arid bloomscape was already full of early morning visitors in sun hats and boots. The mirage was no longer a scandal's refuge. It was its own ecosystem. At the center stood the Sinclair Martinez Botanical Institute, a shining greenhouse and research center, reborn from the original dome, with expanded solar-powered labs, education wings, and open-air meeting spaces, shaded by climbing bougainvillea. The foundation bore both names now, Rose's and Julian's, side by side. Inside, Rose moved through the conservatory with purpose. Her linen shirt was half unbuttoned from the heat, curls pulled into a twist, fingers stained with pollen. She had just finished leading a morning tour for a visiting ecology program from Mexico City. She loved the look in the students' eyes, wide, curious, full of a hunger she recognized from her own early years. But now she was late. She ducked into the north corridor, past the new lab filled with soil sequencing equipment and temperature-controlled storage, through the wide doors that opened onto the glass amphitheater where Julian was waiting. He stood at the edge of the stage, speaking to a small, distinguished group of donors, local leaders, and press, dressed in a simple charcoal jacket and cream shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled. He looked both older and younger than he had a year ago. Weathered, grounded, alive. "And what we're doing here," he was saying, "isn't just scientific. It's human. Every seed we plant tells the desert we're still listening." The audience applauded. Rose stepped into the light. Julian turned to her and smiled. And everything else faded. After the ceremony, Rose found him on the roof deck of the new West greenhouse, leaning against the railing, sipping from a bottle of water like it was wine. The horizon stretched wide and gold in every direction. She came up behind him and rested her chin on his shoulder. "Nice speech." "Nice save," he replied. "You timed that entrance like a soap opera reveal. I had soil under my nails. I'd expect nothing less." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the slow sway of agave and thorned acacia in the breeze. Rose's voice was soft. "We did it." Julian turned to her. "No. You did it." "We," she insisted. He grinned. "I'll allow it." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box worn and faded, handed it to him. Julian arched a brow. "You're proposing?" "Not quite." He opened it. Inside was a brooch, vintage silver, shaped like a rose in mid-bloom. In the center, instead of a gem, was a tightly coiled seed pod cast in glass. His breath caught. "It was your mother's," Rose said. "The archivist found it last month in a sealed drawer. I restored it." Julian stared at it for a long moment, eyes bright. "She'd have loved you," he said. Rose rested her hand on his. "I hope she sees us." "She is us," he said. "Every bit of this, what we're building. What we've become." He pinned the brooch to his lapel. "You're sure?" she whispered. He nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything." That evening, the greenhouse lit up for the annual Bloom Under Glass Benefit, a twilight fundraising gala for visiting scientists, desert conservationists, and students receiving scholarships through the Desert Rose Fund, which had doubled in size since its founding 6 months ago. Rose stood beside Julian at the edge of the garden, greeting guests as they passed beneath an arch of flowering vines and string lights. The roses, hybrid and heirloom alike, were in full bloom. Even Esperanza, which had become the symbolic flower of the new mirage, had sprouted an entirely new subvariant, its outer petals tinted with a hint of violet from cross-pollination, a rose born of chaos, transformed by care. Everything they had built stood in quiet bloom around them. And yet, there was still one more thing Julian hadn't said. He reached into his jacket pocket. Not a ring. A key. He held it out to her. Rose blinked. "What's this?" "It's not just a symbol," Julian said. "It's the real key to the desert villa at the edge of the reserve. I restored it, built a new greenhouse behind it. A writing room. A place to disappear when the world is too loud." Her lips parted. "You once told me you needed space," he continued. "That you'd only ever feel safe in a place that didn't need you to be anyone but exactly who you are." She nodded, tears threatening. "That's what I'm giving you," he said. "A home, not just a project." She took the key in shaking fingers. Then, slowly, leaned in. Their kiss wasn't theatrical. It wasn't staged. It was quiet. Rooted. A promise not of forever but of each day after. The desert before sunrise was a different kind of quiet. Not empty. Not still. Just listening. Rose stepped barefoot across the cool stone path between the rows of roses, a woven shawl loose over her shoulders. Behind her, the dome of the greenhouse curved like a second sky, its lights dimmed, misting system asleep. The only sound was the soft hush of the wind through thorn and bloom. Julian joined her a moment later, his hair tousled, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She took one without a word. They sipped in silence, watching as the horizon brightened first gray, then lavender, then the first trace of soft gold. "It's almost hard to remember," she said softly. "What?" "The chaos." Julian nodded. "That was just the pruning." She smiled. "Good metaphor. You taught me that one." They walked between the rose beds. The Esperanza line had taken root so deeply, now it was seeding, naturally thriving on native rainfall and enhanced soil they'd developed in the lab. Dozens of new hybrids had been documented, including the Reckoning variant from his mother's journal, one with crimson petals and a smoky scent, adapted to extreme drought. Julian paused beside one of the bushes, crouched down, and touched the soil. "She was right," he said. "The desert remembers." Rose knelt beside him. "She'd be proud of you." He looked at her. "She'd be proud of us." A pause. Then, with a wry smile. "And probably a little furious we didn't file for tax-exempt status earlier." Rose laughed. "Definitely." They sat there for a moment, the dirt cool beneath them, the garden unfurling in every direction. A few students were starting to gather at the Institute's main gate for the morning ecology workshop. Someone had started coffee in the teaching kitchen. The mirage was waking, but gently. Julian turned toward her. "Do you ever think we were meant to meet here?" Rose tilted her head. "No." He blinked. "I think we chose to meet here," she said. "Every day we stayed. Every time we showed up instead of walking away." She placed her hand over his. "That's better than fate," she added. "That's commitment." He kissed her knuckles. They stood, hand in hand, and continued walking. At the front of the institute, a new sign had been installed. Desert Rose Institute, a partnership in preservation, education, and ecological renewal. Below it, a bronze plaque etched with the names of every research assistant, intern, and early supporter, including 2 anonymous donors from Julian's personal trust, listed only as "for Camille." They passed a group of students journaling in the shade. Rose paused to greet them, crouching to point out a bee hovering near the base of an unopened rosebud. "Solitary bee," she said. "Notice the size? They're native. Less flashy than honeybees, but vital. They pollinate the difficult ones. The stubborn flowers." Julian watched her as she spoke, her fingers dancing over air, her words painting tiny truths like brushstrokes. This was what she looked like when she was in her element, not performing. Belonging. He felt something quiet click into place inside him. She finished with the students and walked back toward him. "Well," she said. "I was thinking," he said. "That's always dangerous." He grinned. "We should do a traveling series." Her brow rose. "We?" "Desert ecosystems. Across the Southwest." "You teach." "I produce." She considered it. "On camera?" "No. Audio. Journal style. Story and science." She smiled. "You mean like a podcast?" "I mean like a field diary with a budget." Rose looped her arm through his. "I'll think about it." "You're always thinking about it. And you're always throwing wild ideas into the wind." "Which," he said, "you tend to catch." She stopped walking. "I'll catch this one," she said. And then she kissed him. Not the kind of kiss that needed to mean everything. Just the kind that said, "I'm here. Still choosing you. Still showing up." The sun was fully risen now. Mirage shimmered in light, its clay walls golden, its gardens humming with bees and breath. The institute was alive with the soft sound of learning. In the greenhouse, irrigation kicked on with a gentle hiss. Julian and Rose stood at the top of the slope looking down at it all. She reached for his hand again. He didn't let go. They didn't need to say anything else. This wasn't the end. It was the first full bloom,